Welcome back to the Explanation Pro. Today I'll recap a drama, adventure film based on a true story called In the Heart of the Sea. Spoilers incoming. One evening in 1850, author Herman Melville visits innkeeper Thomas Nickerson, the last survivor of the sinking of the whale ship Essex, offering a hefty sum of money in return for his story. Nickerson, who busies himself creating wooden ships in a bottle, refuses to recount the events. Disappointed, he hastily leaves, feeling his time is wasted until Nickerson's wife convinces him to stay a little longer as she talks to her husband and persuades him to take the money for their livelihood. He begins to reluctantly tell him a strange tale about Essex's encounter with an unusual sea creature. In the early 1820s, before petroleum's introduction into the market, fuel companies used whale fat, blubber, to power lamps and produce soap. These companies employ able men who are willing to risk their lives in whaling to farm the blubber. Seafarer Owen Chase is a well-known whale hunter who lives happily with his pregnant wife, Peggy, while working for a significant whaling company in Nantucket. After some housework, he meets with the owners, who plan to hire him for the Essex as the first mate. Disappointed, he reminds them of their promise to let him be captain of his ship if he brought back 1,500 barrels of oil. Unfortunately, they deferred this as they had given the position of captain to George Pollard Jr., heir to the fortune of a great whaling family but an inexperienced mariner. Just as he leaves unsatisfied with their decision, they offer him a 1/15 percentage of his voyage revenue with the incentive of being captain once he can bring back 2,000 barrels of whale oil. They later meet with Pollard to tell him the good news. Coming back home, Owen talks to his wife and expresses his resentment toward the decision. She worries that this voyage will be extended long enough for him to miss the baby's conception. Knowing he cannot pass up this opportunity to be captain, Owen is driven to make his father's last wish come true of sailing the seas with his ship. As he promises to return as soon as possible, she leaves him her necklace for him to always remember her. Meanwhile, George Sr. advises his son to remain stern as a captain, treating no one as his equal while proudly carrying their family name. On the day of their departure, Owen rides a boat towards the Essex as his wife bids farewell. Simultaneously, a 14-year-old Nickerson and his 17-year-old friend Barzillai sign on as cabin boys. He looks enthused by the whaling pins some of the mates are sporting on their uniforms, promising to earn 12 of them in the future. Afterward, Owen climbs aboard and reunites with Matthew Joy, the second mate of the Essex and a childhood friend. He then makes pleasantries with Captain George, who promises to help him earn the crew's respect and calls him out if he mismanages anything during the expedition. The two currently have a civil relationship, as they both desire to take command of the ship. With the anchor getting hauled, Owen and Matthew direct the crew to get the vessel moving, but one of the top sheets hits a snag and cannot be opened. The brave first mate takes action and quickly climbs up to cut the rope with his knife and unfurl the sail. The crew cheers in amazement as the captain looks on in envy. Sometime later, the captain and his mates eat supper, as the former brings up some things he knows about Owen's father, including his incarceration. The first mate excuses him, feeling slighted over his assumptions about his upbringing. Meanwhile, the crew is enjoying their downtime at the galley with a hearty feast and some music. Owen comes in and announces the members of each whaling team. The captain's cousin, Henry Coffin, questions him, doubtful of their success in Wales. He shrugs him off and orders the crew to focus on their objective no matter what. He notices Nickerson is seasick, so he requests him to come on deck. He puts his hand on his shoulder and pushes the boy overboard, threatening to drop him into the sea. As he is pulled up, the terrified cabin boy vomits on Owen, relieving his motion sickness. He opens up about his mother's death while his father gets lost at sea before his birth. Realizing his longing for a family, Owen welcomes him as part of the crew and orders him to swab the deck as he leaves. The following day, as they approach the Gulf Stream, Owen orders the ship to slow its course for them to observe the weather. The captain appears and instructs the studding sails to be lifted, citing the need to hasten their speed as they are 2 days behind schedule. Though Owen reluctantly agrees, he sees they are moving towards a storm system that seems to be catching up with them, so he alerts the captain, as they will indeed have a hard time navigating rough seas. George ignores this, wanting the crew to experience some heavy rainfall. Unfortunately, the storm causes the waters to get choppier as the wind blows their sails in all directions. Owen's fears have indeed come true as it appears to be more violent than expected. George realizes he has made a terrible decision and instructs Benjamin Lawrence to steer the ship back, but it is too late as they will risk tipping from the side. Owen argues with the captain as the two men clash on taking command amid the raging storm. Just then, waves crash inside the ship and throw some of the crew to the side of the deck. Meanwhile, the topgallant sails are nearly breaking from the mast due to the water's impact, so Owen teams up with Matthew to cut the ropes and stretch them out to straighten the ship. Fortunately, their plan works, and they manage to withstand the brunt of the storm, with some minor damages. As the sea calms, George meets with Owen privately in his quarters to accuse him of disobeying the captain's orders, as he believes he jeopardized the crew during the storm. He expects him to resign when they return to land, but Owen argues he was not performing well as a captain, making poor decisions. George angrily looks down on Owen as he insults him for being nothing but a son of a farmer. Owen brushes the captain's arrogance aside and explains that they must put their differences aside rather than risk their reputations by returning to port without profit. In their third month at sea, the crew of the Essex encounters a pod of sperm whales. They quickly split into 3 small boats and headed out to hunt them. Owen quickly spots the biggest one in the pod, worth at least 50 barrels of oil. He manages to spear the whale on its tail as it tries to flee. Owen's group cheers in excitement over their catch as their boat is pulled by the creature at high speed. Unfortunately, Nickerson warns that the rope's length is dwindling since the whale is diving deeper, so Owen asks Matthew in his boat for another line. To save the crew, Matthew attempts to cut the last bit of rope, but fortunately, the whale tires itself out and swims slowly. Upon returning to the surface, Owen repeatedly stabs it to finish the kill, as blood shoots out from the creature's blowhole. Covered in its blood, Nickerson begins to reconsider the profession based on this experience. By nightfall, the crew exhausts all the creature's parts, from its meat to its insides. As some sailors cannot obtain more blubber from the deeper corners, Owen commands the young cabin boy to drop down the blowhole and take the rest. Nickerson is immediately nauseated, inhaling the whale's guts, and from that moment on, he chooses never to work on a whaling ship again. In total, the catch only gave them roughly 47 barrels of oil. This is clearly not enough, forcing Essex to venture out further. Nearly a year at sea, the Essex sails past Cape Horn to the Pacific, hoping for better luck catching another whale. However, they find no more sightings, so Captain George constantly stays in the cabin to busy himself with updating the travel log. His relationship with Owen becomes more strained, with both men unable to keep their promises to their respective loved ones. Sometime later, in Atacames, Ecuador, the ship exchanges oil for food as rations have begun to deplete. As the crew takes time to enjoy the island's resources, the Essex's officers meet Spanish Captain Clemente Peláez of the Santa Maria. He tells them about a bountiful location called Offshore Grounds, 2,000 miles west, where they can acquire up to 3,000 barrels of whale oil. He continues with a warning, claiming that a 100-feet-long vengeful white whale destroyed his ship, killing 6 of his men while getting his left arm cut off. Dismissing the story as a myth, Captain Pollard and Owen lead the expedition west. Henry comes to the captain's quarters, echoing the crew's thoughts on the danger that this endeavor is waiting for, only to be berated and sent off. After some more time, they finally find the unspoiled grounds, teeming with whales which delighted the crew. They lower 3 small boats, with Owen's group following a pod swimming right next to them. Suddenly, the tail of a massive bull sperm whale capsizes their boat, and everyone falls into the water. Realizing that this is the whale Captain Peláez mentioned, they swim back to the Essex, as Owen instructs sailor William Bond to lower the tackle. As the group returns, they quickly repair their boat as the others haul 2 other whales that are speared. Unfortunately, the white whale returns, slamming into the hull, killing 2 men and creating a hole in the ship's hold. As Owen tries to locate the leakage, the white whale turns back and hooks itself into the Essex. Owen returns to the deck and stabs the beast near its eye, only to breach and slam its tail onto the ship. It flees quickly, dragging the anchor that cuts through the deck and destroys almost everything. With the hull stove in and pumps not working, the crew abandons the sinking Essex in the 3 intact whaling boats and must sail hundreds of miles to shore with minimal supplies. The whale follows and attacks again, but they escape to the tiny Henderson Island. Captain George presumes it could be Ducie Island and admits there is no way to be sure without measuring instruments. While gathering food, Owen discovers the long-dead corpses of earlier castaways, after which the crew fears they might die waiting on the island before another ship passes by. Just 4 men decide to stay while the rest set sail again on the boats, hoping to drift along the trade winds and find better lands. Soon after, one of the men dies, and the remaining crew reluctantly decides to cannibalize him. The older Nickerson is overcome with remorse for his cannibalism and stops his story. He thinks his wife could not love him if she knew about it. However, when she comforts him, she assures him that she still loves him no matter what he was forced to do to survive. This encourages him enough to finish the story, Sometime after, the three boats are separated by the currents, and one is lost. The other two further resort to cannibalism to survive, with George's cousin willingly sacrificing himself. The white whale suddenly returns, and Owen gets into position for a final attack. The whale breaches for a moment, allowing him to observe a portion of his previously thrown harpoon still embedded above the whale's eye. He hesitates and stares into the whale's left eye as the whale stares back at him. After a moment of thought, he lowers his harpoon, deciding not to kill the creature out of pity. Following this encounter, the whale swims away peacefully and is never seen again. On the 87th day, a passing ship rescues the captain's boat, while Owen's boat continues to drift with no food or water. Finally, with the survivors on the verge of death 3 days later, the latter's vessel reaches Chile's Alejandro Selkirk Island. The survivors are brought back to Nantucket, where they finally reunite with their distraught families, while Owen meets his daughter, Phoebe Ann, for the first time. The crew decides not to disclose anything about their survival, as it is too difficult to relive the events. At the maritime office, the Nantucket ship's owners ask Captain Pollard and his first mate to cover up the unbelievable story to protect the industry's reputation. Owen then makes it clear that he has had enough of their dishonesty and no longer cares about them. He outrightly refuses to go along and resigns. As he leaves, the young Nickerson finds the courage to express his gratitude for his time with him before heading to Falmouth. Owen gifts him his whale pin and bids him good luck. Nickerson continues by saying that a ship was sent to Henderson Island to rescue the surviving men. Captain Pollard faced the committee inquiry by telling the truth about what happened, much to their outrage. Later, he led another expedition to find and kill the whale to satisfy his obsession. However, he was never able to, which led him to take command of another ship along the shallow water of the Hawaiian Islands, and he was forced to retire after 2 accounts of misfortune aboard the vessel. As for Owen, he continued sailing the seas and became a merchant captain after moving him and his family to New Bedford. After hearing such an inspirational story, Melville admits Nickerson has given him the courage to go places where one does not wish to go. After the innkeeper asks if his story will be sufficient for the novel, he reveals he will not use it, choosing to make a work of fiction instead while also being based on actual events. As he walks out, they gush about some news regarding a man from Pennsylvania who struck oil from under the ground, which is quite an extraordinary find. Melville then departs for Pittsfield, Massachusetts, to compose his novel, Moby Dick, beginning by writing its first line, "Call me Ishmael." It was completed that same year and published in 1851. American author Nathaniel Hawthorne read the book and called it an epic, worthy of the tales of Homer, that would surely appeal to American readers. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.